How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 70 of Masechta Nedarim, friends. Daf 70 talks about Nedarim. It talks about like being Mavatal Nedarim, like the fiance being made for the Neder, and then we get to another Mishnah, and that's what we're talking about. So we're in Daf Samach Testament Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Rabba asks Akasha Kaim Lichi Hayom Mahu. Friends, you hear the kasha? If he says, I'm being Mekayim the Neder, but only for today, right? So she says she's not going to eat pizza. Then he says, okay, fine, you don't want to eat pizza, don't eat pizza for today. So, so do we say that, well, it's basically, he's saying that, that okay, so I'm being Mekayim it for today. Well, it's basically the same thing as he's saying he's being made for it for tomorrow. Or we say, yeah, but he didn't say that. All he said was that he's being Mekayim today. He didn't say that he's being made for tomorrow. And if you're going to say that, okay, well, he didn't say it. He never said that he's being made for it tomorrow. But what if he did say Mufar Lichi L'machar? What if he did say that I'm being made for the Neder for tomorrow? Mi'aminon L'machar L'matzi Mefer. Do we say, yeah, but he can't be made for it tomorrow? He has to be made for it on the day that he hears it. De'akaime L'nidre Hayom. He was ready to Mekayim it today. O Dilma Kevin D'lo Amar La Kayim Lichi Hayom Ki Ka'amar La Mufar Lichi L'machar Me'ayom Ka'amar. I'm sorry. So let's read that again. Let's read that again, right? So let's start from the top of the Amar. Imtim say Lomar Halo Amar Lo, and if you're going to say that he didn't specifically, right, in the first case, right, where it says he's being Mekayim it today, right? So he didn't say anything about tomorrow. But Amar La Mufar Lichi L'machar Ma. What if all he said to her was that tomorrow it's going to be Mufar? All he said to her was tomorrow it's going to be Mufar. Today she says she's not eating pizza, and he says tomorrow it's going to be Mufar. So do we say, look, he can't be made for her neder tomorrow because he's be'etzem, right? He's saying tomorrow it's going to be mufar, which is be'etzem, saying that today it's mekuyim. Or perhaps since he never said that specifically, all he said is that tomorrow it's going to be mufar. He didn't specifically say that today it's mekuyim. So ki ka'omar lo mufar lichi l'machar me'ayom ka'omar. So when he says that tomorrow is going to be mufar, it's going to be annulled, so then he's basically saying from today already is going to be annulled, right? So do we say that, right? So all he's saying in this case is that tomorrow is going to be mufar. So what does that mean? Does that mean that, well, by saying tomorrow is being mayfair, that means that B'meileh is being Mekayim it for today, and therefore it's not allowed? Or do we say that, no, he never said that he's being Mekayim today, all he's saying is that he's being made for tomorrow. So maybe that's Ki'ilu, he's saying he's already being made for today already. V'imtim tzalomar afilu hachi came the kimo hayom l'mocher kaman de isei dami. And if you're going to say that since he's be'etzim being mekayim today, so then it stays tomorrow. So omar lo kaim lichi sha'a ma'u. But what if he said to her something else, right? It's complicated when you're talking about today and tomorrow, because be'etzim he could really only be made for it the day that he hears it. So by tomorrow it's already too late. So getting into the whole thing about, being made for it tomorrow, that becomes problematic. But what if he says, instead of today and tomorrow, what if he says, Kayim lichi shah, I'm going to be Mekayim it for 1 hour. So after that hour, there's still the rest of the day for him to be made for, right? Or not for him to be made for, but Kilu, it's not like he's being Mekayim it until a point when it can no longer be made for anymore. Meaning, if he's only doing it for an hour, well, then it ends, and there's still time in the day for him to be made for. So is it basically saying after an hour it's going to be mufar? So the day that he hears it, he's basically being made for it, but at an offset of an hour. O Dilma halo amarlo. Or alternatively, but he didn't say that. All he said was that he's being mekayim for an hour. He didn't say that he's being made for it after the hour. He never said that explicitly. Imtim salomar halo amarlo. What and right, so again, imtim salomar, if you're going to say halo amarlo, that he didn't say it, right, all he said is being mekayim for an hour. He didn't say that he's being made for it after an hour. He never said that. So miu amarlo mai. But what about if he did say to her? What if he said that after an hour I'm being made for the neder? Mi'aminan kevon kiyamo. Do we say, look, once he's basically being mekayim it for that first hour, that's it, it's too late. Or alternatively, since the entire day he could either be making it or made for it, ki amar mufur lichi la'achosha mahani. So therefore, maybe when he says that, look, after the 1 hour offset, I'm being made for your neder. So maybe it does work, because ultimately after an hour, it's still the same day that he heard it, then it should work with an offset. Tashma reini nazira. Well, if a woman says that she's going to be a nazira, v'shama bayla v'amar, and her husband hears and he says va'ani, mi oichit, me too. That's what he says. He says me too. Ein yachol lahafer, he cannot be made for that neder nazirus anymore. He cannot be made for her neder nazirus, since he also said va'ani. Ve'amai, why can he not be made for her neder nazirus anymore? Nema va'ani do'amar hu al nafshe dahave nazir. Let's say that when he says va'ani, he's saying about himself that he's going to be a nazir. Aval areini nazira dila sha achas kaima. But with regard to her, to say with regard to himself, when he says va'ani and mi oichit, so he's saying that he's going to be a nazir. But let's say that with regards to his wife, when he says va'ani, let's argue that he's basically saying, okay, so she's going to be a nazir for an hour, but after that, right, he could be made for it. Why do we say that he can't be made for it? Right, it says ein yachol lahafer. That's what it said a few lines earlier. How come? So is it not because once he's mekayim it for any bit of time, so it's mekuyim? That when she says that she's going to be a nazira and he says va'ani, me too, and we're saying that he can no longer be made for it, it sounds like because since when he says va'ani, he's basically being mekayim what she's saying. She's saying she's going to be a nazira, and he says I'm also going to be a nazir. So since he's being mekayim it for that amount of time, for that first hour, so therefore he can no longer be made for it. So we see that if you're mekayim it for a shah, for 1 hour, you can no longer, it can't be moved for after that. So, and for the Gemara, no. Because Sarva called va'ani, command amr kayim lichi la'olam dami. The Gemara says no. When a fellow says va'ani and me too, she says she's going to be a nazira, and he says me too, he's basically saying he's being mekayim her neder nazirus forever. And therefore, that's why he can't be made for it. But we didn't, in the case of, it's only for an hour, so maybe he would be able to be made for after an hour. So it's inconclusive. We don't answer the kasha. Okay. It says the Mishnah Mesa'av, lo nisrok nushus lebal. Oh, so says the Mishnah that if the father dies, so the husband does not get rishus to be made for a nedarim, right? A Nedarim also. So both her father and her fiance have the ability together to be made for her nedarim. And we're saying Mesa'av, if her father dies, lo nisrok nushus lebal. His ability to be, his sort of contribution to being made for a nedarim does not get transferred to the fiance. Right? So a Nedarim also, her father and her fiance jointly are made for a nedarim. If her father dies, then the fiance is unable to be, right, the father's dead, and the fiance is unable to be made for the nedarim on his own. Right? Lo nisrok nushus lebal. The father's ability to be made for the nedarim is not transferred to the fiance. Mesabal, however, if it's punkt fakert, if the fiance dies nisrok nushas lav, well, his ability to be made for the Nedarim does get transferred to the father, and the father would be able to be made for Nedarim on his own at that point. And in this sense, the strength, the leverage, the position of the father is stronger than that of the fiance, in that if the fiance dies, the father can be made for the Nedarim on his own, whereas if the father dies, the fiance cannot be made for the Nedarim on his own. Now, in another way, however, in a different way, however, the strength of the fiance is stronger than that of the father. That a fiance is able to be mefer her nidarim when she is a bogeres, whereas a father cannot. That once she becomes a bogeres, once she becomes an adult, her father can no longer be made for a nidarim, whereas her fiance would be able to. And the Gemara is going to explain what exactly that case is. Says the Gemara, my time, how come the Mishnah says that if the father dies, the fiance would be unable to be made for her Nedarim on his own? Because the pasuk says that as long as she's a naira, she's still bebeis avia. Even if her father dies, there's still sort of a concept of her being bebeis avia, to the extent that the husband, the fiance, is unable to be made for an Nedarim, because even though the father is dead, she's still in some ways considered bebeis avia, as if she's in her father's household, and the fiance would be unable on his own to be made for her Nedarim. If the fiance dies, so then his ability to be made for a Nedarim gets transferred to the father. We know, and how do we know this? Amar Rabbi says, Rabbi the Amar Kakas, the pasuk says, that if she will if she will surely be engaged to a fellow, and she has Nedarim, makish kod me'avoya shniya lekod me'avoya rishona. Right? The pasuk says, im hayosiyah, that two hayotiyah, two lashonos of havaya, of being, which is a reference to kiddushin, to being engaged. And we're talking about a situation, right? So in hayotiyah, she's engaged twice. She's engaged to the first guy. He takes up permanent residence in Wellwood. He dies. And then she gets engaged, she gets engaged the second time. And we compare Makish, I'm going to read that again, Makish Kod Me'avoya Shniyeh, we compare the Hafaras Nedarim of prior to the second engagement, Likod Me'avoya Rishona, to the state of Hafaras Nedarim prior to her first engagement. Makod Me'avoya Rishona Av Mefer L'chudei, Av Kod Me'avoya Shniyeh Av Mefer L'chudei. Well, just like before she got engaged the first time, so she was simply a single woman, a non-engaged woman, her father alone had the ability, girl, I guess, her father alone had the ability to be made for her Nedarim. So just like prior to her first engagement, her father alone had the ability to be made for her Nedarim, when she gets engaged and her fiance dies, and then she gets engaged again, that period in between the two engagements, i.e. the period when her fiance had died, her father would be able to be made for her Nedarim on his own. Just like prior to her first engagement, her father was able to be made for her Nedarim on his own. So also prior to her second engagement, her father is able to be made for Nedarim on his own. And therefore, the ability of the first husband to be made for, the first fiance to be made for her Nedarim gets transferred to her father upon death. Well, let's say that the father could be made for her Nedarim on his own when the fiance dies. Let's say that that's only Nedarim that the fiance had not heard about when he was alive. But Nedarim that the fiance had known about when he was alive, lo matzi mefer of l'chudei. Let's say that the father would be unable to be mefer on his own if the fiance had known about it when he was alive. Ibn Nedarim shalaniru la'arus mibenurei beis avia nafka. But vows that the husband did not know about, well, that's just Benureh Bisavia, that when she's a Naira and she's in the house of her father, and her father alone could be made for her Nedarim, that would be talking about Nedarim that the fiance did not know about. The Chiddush over here is that even Nedarim that the fiance knew about, the father would be able to be made for on his own when the fiance takes up permanent residence in Wellwood. And we say, okay, that in this way, the strength of the father is stronger than that of the fiance. But we said also in another way, in a different way, the strength of the fiance is stronger than that of the father, and we said that is with relation to Bagris, that when she's a Bogeres, the fiance would be able to be made for her Nedarim, and the father would not. So, what are we talking about? That when she's a Bogeres, the fiance can be made for the Nedarim, but not the father. So, if we say, well, it's talking about that he was Mekadesher, the fiance was Mekadesher when she was a Naira, and over the course of the engagement she became a Bogeres, and now that she becomes a Bogeres, he can still be made for her Nedarim, but the father cannot. So Michte, but 1 second, let's see, Misa Motzia Merishus of, that if her father dies, so then her father no longer has the ability to be made for her Nedarim, of course, and that's not transferred to the inheritors. Uvagris Motzia Merishus of, and also becoming a Bogeres means that her father can no longer be made for her Nedarim, right? Once she's a Bogeres, her father can no longer be made for her Nedarim. So there are two ways that the father loses his ability to be made for her Nedarim. One is that he dies, and the other is that she becomes a Bogeres. Mamisa lo nisrokna rishus libal, and just like we said that if the father dies, his ability to be made for a Nedarim is not transferred to the fiance. Well, then Bagris lo nisrokna rishus libal. So then it would make sense to say that also if she becomes a Bogeres while they are engaged, the right that the father had to be made for her Nedarim does not get transferred to the fiance now that she is a Bogeres. Ela shekidsha kishihi Bogeres. Rather, let's say it's talking about that he was Mekadesher when she was already a Bogeres. So she was already a Bogeres, and he is Mekadesher. So then he is able to be made for her Nedarim, and the father is not. But we already learned that once. We're going to learn it on Daf Ayin Gimel Beis. HaBogeres Sheshasu Yud Beis Chodesh. That we're going to talk about a Bogeres who has waited 12 months, that they haven't got married yet, and that the fiance is now responsible to pay for her mizonos, for her food, and he's also able to be made for a Nedarim. So we already know that when a fellow is Mekadesh, a Bogeres, he can be made for her Nedarim, but the father cannot. Hagufakash. Now the Gemara digresses for a minute to say, 1 second, I don't understand. What does it mean, Bogeres Sheshasu Yud Beis Chodesh? Right? We learned in Masechta Ksubis that they would back in the day, they would get engaged, and then they would wait 12 months and then get married. And if the fiance does not marry her after 12 months, he has to pay for her mizonos, and he can be made for her Nedarim. But he says, I don't understand. A Bogeres who waited 12 months in engagement. But a Bogeres doesn't wait 12 months to get married. A Bogeres would only wait 30 days. So why are we saying a Bogeres who waits 12 months? A Bogeres would only wait 30 days. Tni Bogeres v'sheshasu yud beis chodesh. So teach a Bogeres who would wait only 30 days, as well as a Naira who waited 12 months. The fiance can be made for a Nedarim. So Mikomakum Kasha. So we still have this question. Why do I need to teach it twice? Right? Why do I need to teach over here that when she is a Bogeres, that if the fiance is Mekadesh her as a Bogeres, he can be made for a Nedarim, and the father cannot? So we give two possible answers. Either I can say either you could say, well, this is really the main source. This is really the main place where we're writing that once she's a Bogeres, that if he's Mekadesh as a Bogeres, he can be made for Nedarim, but the father can't. And the reason why we mention on Ayin Gimel and Beis is only to teach us, to introduce to us the machlokas between the Rabban and Rabbi Eliezer, which is not listed here. Alternatively, Bogeres Davka, the other Mishnah is the one that's the main source. But the only reason why we mention it over here is because since it was talking about how the father is sort of stronger than the husband in a sense, so we may also mention how the husband is also stronger than the father in the sense that if he's Mekadesh as a Bogeres, then he can be made for an Nedarim, whereas the father can't. But that was really just sort of to be symmetrical with the Reisha. But really the main source would be over there to teach that if he's Mekadesh as a Bogeres, then he can be made for an Nedarim, but the father cannot. Friends, that was Daf Ayin of Masechta Nedarim. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out. Bye.